Welcome back to the Power Public YouTube channel. Today we're going to be showing you the easy way to tune your Rotax racing engine at the go-kart track. So let's get to it. Welcome back to the Power Public YouTube channel. Today's video we're going to be stepping you through the processes that we go through at the racetrack to retune your Rotax engine. Now the engines operate in a very small window of high performance, so they will operate over a pretty broad spectrum, but when you're chasing that last little bit, you've really got to refine the jetting. And I'm going to step you through today how do we go about it on our go-kart race engine. We took out the demo Tony Kart 801R last night and did some engine testing, and it was awesome. It's great fun to be back in the seat, loved it. Did 5 sessions. It was pretty hard work. I've been out of the kart for about 6 months with a bit of a rib injury, so I was definitely a bit rusty for the first couple of sessions. Now, we didn't have any major jetting issues last night, but if it did, this is what I would have done. So to change the main jet, the easiest way is to get a flat blade screwdriver and wedge that down on the carburetor. And you can just add a little bit of pressure and slowly lever the fuel line off, and then stick that up underneath the radiator flap like so it doesn't dribble fuel all over the floor. Next up, we're going to remove the throttle cable cap off the top of the carburetor. Just unscrews. It's a normal right hand thread, and we're pulling out the throttle slide here. You can see that there's a cutaway at the front that always faces forward on your go-kart, if you didn't know, and this is the needle. Now you might not be able to see it in the video, but it's tapered. It's a lot finer at the point than it is at the base here. And it's got a needle jet down inside the carburetor that has the matching female component. And so as that slides out, the gap in between the needle and the needle jet gets bigger and flows more fuel past it. Now what we're going to do is loosening off these 2 hose clamps. I'm using a 7mm socket. You can use a Phillips or a flat blade screwdriver if you want. Then just slide the hose clamp off, and you can pull the airbox off the front of the carburetor. Then undo the second one here. Make sure it's got a bit of slack there so you can move it. And then all we're going to do is rotate the carburetor just like that and pull it out. The next thing we're going to do is drain the fuel out of the fuel bowl. Grab your fuel jug and tip the carburetor up and drain all the fuel back into there. Now after practice last night, I drained the fuel out of my carburetor already, so it was pretty much dry. So now we're going to remove the sump off the fuel bowl, and I'm going to show you how to remove the fuel bowl as well so we can get to the main jets. This carburetor's got the knurled sump plug, so you can just spin that off by hand. And you can see there's a little O-ring here. This one here's got a little bit of fuel and oil residue, so I'm just going to wipe that up. Now you can see your main jet. Give the float bowl a little bit of a rub there, get the leftover fuel and bits and pieces off it with your rag. With a flat blade screwdriver, unscrew the main jet. And you can see this little guy comes out with it. So you can see that this is the main jet. It goes into its little brass guy like that, and then it goes onto the carburetor like so. And that is the way you can change your main jet. Now to screw that back in, go backwards a little bit, get it straight on. Main jet change. So now if you're at a track at sea level and you've jetted and you've got a 122 like we did, if we went up 200 meters, say to our local track Toowoomba, I'd probably go down 1 main jet to a 120. And if I went to Warwick, which is 400 meters above sea level, I'd go down to a 118. Now that's because as you go up in elevation, you lose air pressure, and that's what I find affects your jetting. Also to watch your humidity. As the humidity goes up, i.e. it's raining, 100% humidity, you can go down main jets, and then if it goes really dry and cool, so you got low humidity, less than 30%, and it's a cool day, you might have to jet up one, so I'd go to a 125. Symptoms to look for of lean jetting is a classic popping sound at around 12,500 RPM to 13,000. It's a real lean pop or a miss. That's a classic of the main jet is too lean and you need to go up a main jet. And when the main jet is too rich and you want to go down a main jet, the classic of that is the engine will pull hard through the mid-range and it gets to the top end and it doesn't really rev out anymore. It gets to about 13,000 RPMs down the main straight and will just sort of hesitate there for too long. And that's a good classic of the engine is too rich. Another thing you can do if you're out on the track and your engine is too rich is to put your radiator flap down and make the water temperature hotter, which makes your gas more volatile, and it can help while you're out on the circuit. But best to come in and change your main jet. So another way to get access to the jets is to remove the 3 bolt screws here. That's a 4mm Allen key. So now you've got access to all your jets. This little guy here is our choke jet, and this one here is our idle and transition jet. There's 2 of those there in a row. We don't change those anymore. There's a rule here in Australia and pretty much all of the world, I believe, that you have to run the standard jets from the manufacturer. The only jet you're allowed to change is your main jet. Sometimes when you're tuning your Rotax engine, you don't really want to change your main jet because it's pretty close up top, but it's just hesitating a little bit down out of the slower corners. That's a great time to change your float level. So I'm going to show you how to change your float level the easy way. First up, we're going to have to remove the main jet. So there's a few ways you can change your float level. I like to measure down from the top of this dump tube, and we're normally in the 23 to 24mm range. This one here is 23.1. So the other side as well, you want to double check, and we're at 23.4. Now when I was driving this kart last night, it was hesitating a little bit in the slow corners, like there wasn't enough fuel in the bowl. So at 23.1mm, I know that that's a fractionally lean. So I'm going to show you how to richen that up. So another way you can check the float level is to remove your little gasket here by just sliding a flat blade screwdriver and flicking the gasket off the dowel pins. This little guy here is a lever height gauge tool. You can buy them online. I think it's an Intel Sport product. You can get them here in Australia or anywhere really. You can see on this lever height gauge we've got 4.0, 3.5, 3mm, and that's the different distance from here to the fascia, and you can slide that underneath your lever and see exactly in 0.5mm increments how much air gap there is. Okay, you can see here at 3.5mm we were just a fraction lean. So we're going to move the lever over so the lever's touching down on the 3mm. So that's an extra 0.5mm of float level, which should just be the happy medium. Otherwise we could go to the rich as, which is our 2.5. So if we bend the lever down like so. Okay, so slide the screwdriver up here, like so. And we're just going to wedge that open a little bit. So the verniers are reading 23.55. Which equals about a 3mm gap there on the float lever gauge. You can see the 2.5's got an air gap. It's a bit hard to see on the camera. And it's just a tiny fraction under the 3mm. And another way you can double check this float level is to grab the trusty old Allen key, and you can just balance that across the carburetor. If we can just squeeze it in there, you can see it's just a little bit under the 3mm. You can slide it through there as well. So now if you go too far in your float level and you want to bring it back up, as in the float level's too rich, you want to lean it out, you can just get your pointy nose pliers and clamp under here and then on top of the lever and just squeeze those two together. And that will raise the float level and lean out the carburetor. Don't forget to reinstall the main jet first. Base gasket. The float has the word alto. That goes to the top. Now the carburetor is upside down here, so the alto goes in first. And you can see the little countersunk holes here on the floats. They're going to face the bottom of the carburetor. This is the bottom, we're working upside down. You can slide the carburetor bowl back on. Add the 3 bowl screws. Do them up with the T-bar. Then add the float bowl cap. Yours might have the original screw type, which is a 19mm ring spanner, but this one is the knurled type. And you're all good. That's 3 easy ways to check your float level and adjust them depending on the characteristics that your kart has at your local track. Ours was a little bit lean off the corners, it was hesitating, so I richened the float level up. Now, if I had out of slow corners a too rich condition, i.e. I had to floor the accelerator and the engine was really spluttering and carrying on and not running really crisp and just doesn't feel right. You'll know when you feel it. That's when the float level's too rich and you want to lean it out. Another adjustment that you can do is the air bleed screw. 1/2, 1, 1.5, and that's closed. So 1/2, 1, 1.5. We normally run this little air bleed screw at 1.5, but you can go out to 2, 2.5 or 3, which will allow more air through the circuit and atomize the fuel. It's a very fine adjustment and I don't find it really affects my driving all that much myself personally. So I'm just going to set this 1/2, 1, 1.5. Set it back at 1.5 and send it. Okay, so now it's time to put the carburetor back on the kart. So all I'm going to do here is have the carburetor at 90 degrees, go into the air box to give yourself a bit of room, and then push it back into the engine. Grab the 7mm. You can do up the hose clamp nice and tight. Slide the air box onto the carburetor. And then you can do this one up. So now you can put your fuel line back on, and don't forget, if it's a bit tight, you can open it up with the circlip pliers and then just slide that guy on there like so. Now we're ready to put the slide back in, but before we do that, I'm going to show you how to adjust your needle position and the reasons why. First thing you're going to want to do is get yourself a number 10 open end ring spanner. Slide it here underneath the springs. Just undo that like so. So now that you've undone the screw, careful, because if you let go of the spring, it all flies apart and mostly it falls in the dirt. Just kidding. Now that you've got the screw removed, you can just push the needle out like so. And you can see here that we're running the needle clip in its bottom position, which is the richest. And it was still a little bit lean. Now, if I wanted to richen that up more, I couldn't. So I've have to richen up the float level, which we just showed you. But if I went too far with the float level and now it's starting to splutter out of the slow corners, it's pretty hard to see on the camera, but there's a little circlip here and we're just going to knock it off with the pointy nose pliers. So you put the plier onto the needle here and the other part down here on the circlip. And you can just squeeze them together gently and drop that on the ground. So you can see here that there's a tiny little circlip. So if you are going to pop it off, maybe do it over a bench, somewhere where you can find it easy. We just dropped it on the concrete floor, so it was pretty easy to find. But if you throw that into the dirt at the go-kart track or in some grass, good luck, you're just never going to find it. Now we're going to go from the bottom position on the needle, which is clip 5, back to its standard position, which is the center, clip 3. Grab the little circlip in your fingers and try not to pick it up. You can drop it pretty easy. And you can see here we're back in the center of the needle. And we're just going to squeeze that all the way until it's on. You'll feel it click in If you want to double check it, you can actually use your pointy nose pliers just to squeeze the back part of the circlip and the front part of the needle. Now that we've got all this ready, we're going to reinsert the needle into the slide, just like so. We've got to put the spring back into the cap first, so I'm going to put this to one side. We're going to slide the spring back up here over the throttle cable, hold it with my fingers, and then I can hold the spring back with my fingers, hold the nut with the fingernail. Now I can grab my slide, spin that on to the nut, 10mm ring spanner. Once the spanner's on, you can let go of the spring and the spring will actually hold it all together. And you can just rotate that, nip it off, pull the ring spanner out, and you're ready to put it back in the carburetor. So now we're just going to put the slide back into the carburetor, making sure that the cutout is facing forwards. Just give it a little jiggle. There is a couple of guides here. So there's a guide here inside the carburetor for the slide to go down into. Put that down in there like that. Don't force it because you can bend that little needle. You can spin this backwards until it clicks and then lightly spin it forwards and you're all done. So there you have it. That's how you tune your Rotax engine when you're at the track. Now, this problem / question came from a great customer who contacted us during last weekend at the racetrack. He said, "Hey Des, why don't you do this video? It's a great idea." And it was. So thanks very much, Brendan. If you're liking this video and you feel like you want to make a contribution to the cause here at the House of Power, you can go to our Patreon page and subscribe, buy us a coffee, shout us some beers. You can go to the top tier if you really want to go that extra level. Otherwise, you can just follow along here on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up, turn on those pesky notifications, or go to our Instagram or Facebook at Power Republic. Don't forget to head over to our website, www.powerrepublic.com.au. Grab yourself a t-shirt or a brand new Rotax Max race engine. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.